The ChatGPT App Store is now live, and this video is your master guide to everything you need to know to design, build, and submit your ChatGPT apps. And we've built a number of apps, both personally launching them and also for our clients. And so we're going to cover everything that we've learned today. So we are going to make sure that you go through this process with us. So we're going to go from design, build, and submit. And if you follow along, you'll actually have your first app submitted to OpenAI. And the main things we're going to cover are: what is a ChatGPT app and why should you care? Why is it interesting? We're going to talk about how they actually work, what are the mechanics behind the scenes, some good use cases, and the really good design principles to think about because they work different from web apps or mobile apps. We're going to talk about monetization, super important, how you're going to make money. We're then going to build an app. So we're going to go through all the tooling you need, what you need to understand to actually build your first app. And this is going to be for anyone of any background, even if you've never coded before. We're then going to go on how to host it, which is important for getting it live, submit it, again, critical, and then distribution, hints and tricks as well. And just to mention on how we've structured this, so we have got each of these as chapters. And so they're going to be detailed and basically share everything that we've learned to date. And if you want to just cover a certain section, feel free to just jump into that section and go there. Or if you want to follow us the whole way through, watch it end to end. And I think the only other thing to mention is we're recording this on the 31st of December. So this is basically as of, everything we know from January, beginning of January. And then also you do need a ChatGPT Pro subscription to basically test these apps in what's called developer mode, which we'll cover. So just make sure you've got some sort of team or enterprise subscription, and you can have the admin as possible, I think is also useful. So with all that said, I think we can just get into the first section, which talks about what actually is a ChatGPT app. So if I share my screen, I can actually just bring up the first section that ChatGPT had on their launch of their new Apps SDK. And in short, as we know, ChatGPT has been a text-based platform so far. So you'd write a response and you'd get an answer directly within text. Whereas what the SDK does, which is built on something called MCP, which we'll cover, it means that you can bring UI or a visual into the response. And so as you ask ChatGPT something, it won't just give you a text response, but it'll also bring in an actual application. And then you can use that app inside ChatGPT. And so what they did is, this was a couple of months ago now, is they were working with some early partners and they've already got some really interesting apps in there. So this one, for example, is booking.com. And it means that you can tag an app and then you can ask it to then do an action for you, and it will use that application directly in ChatGPT. The Spotify one here, it asks to create a playlist. It creates all the songs, and then it gets Spotify to answer it. Spotify then appears, and then it actually just adds all of those songs. And then you have that playlist. It connects to your Spotify account, and you can continue the experience outside. You've then had this more rich UI. And if you didn't have that, you obviously would have to go to Spotify, search for all those songs. It's much more disjointed. So it adds a huge amount of value to the experience. And I think something else to also show, which is actually just quite cool, is really just to see the App Store. Because if you go to chatgpt.com/app, you can get to this page. And this has got a couple of sections featured. You can filter on productivity and see they've already added a lot in here. Lots of apps you'll recognize: Slack, Replit, etc. And they've also got some lifestyle ones. One hint is tip is to, if you connect to a US VPN, they have all the apps there, because this is a global app store now. There's different apps for different geographies, but if you go to the US, it has pretty much everything. And what you can do is, if you want us to start using these, is all you need to do once you're here is, if you click on an app, then you get taken to its specific page, the screenshots, which we'll cover later, metadata, and then you can just click connect. And then what that will do is it will actually just connect it into your ChatGPT. And you can see here the different apps that we've already connected on this account. So
This is live. You can already build apps today. So that's also why we're creating this resource. We want to help you be one of the first, developers submitting apps. And one thing to call out, what ChatGPT and OpenAI have done is they've turned this into essentially an operating system. Similar to Windows, you can build apps, launch them on your computer in the 1990s. That was a big paradigm shift. Apple has done this with iOS, with mobile apps. Now ChatGPT is introducing apps with an app store. And Elliot is going to talk a little bit about the distribution opportunity, which is, the 10x anything we've seen this early on before. But this is going to create a new ecosystem. This is going to create a new ecosystem. And we're going to see a lot of companies, and these are some of the biggest brands already: Uber, Expedia, Canva, that have already kind of given their confidence that this is going to be a future experience that's important for our product.
Yeah, 100%. And all those apps that you saw in there, those are apps that OpenAI has worked with pre-launching this publicly. So that's why it's a really exciting opportunity right now is we have just had the App Store like officially open so that you can submit apps. Very soon they're going to be opening up those apps so that anyone can have their app available. That's going to be happening likely early January. So super exciting time to be building. And like Vincent said about the distribution opportunity, these are some numbers which, frankly, are just crazy to look back at. So it's been 3 years that ChatGPT has been around, and they've now got over 850 million users. These are a bit not quite up to date. I think some people even quote 900 million, nearly a billion, which honestly is insane. It's a huge percent, above 10% of the global population. And to make some comparisons here, if you compare to when the mobile store opened, so the iPhone apps, it had 6 million iPhones in distribution. So you had an audience of 6 million people when that launched. This has the smallest size, 850 million. So really exciting. If you are an entrepreneur and you are looking to get an application, discovered and surfaced, then that's your audience size. If you're a big brand, these are the number of eyeballs that you can just start to get seeing your company and thinking about how you can take advantage of it. So very cool. And I'll also share just a bit more about directionally where this is heading, because you might ask, well, I'm building, I understand the potential opportunity size, but it's very early. Why is it that interesting? Those are all true. We are very early in the ecosystem, but there's a lot of people that are particularly excited about this. And I think it alludes to what Vincent said around how this is the beginning of a new platform shift. And what we're seeing is LLMs are being used more. And as ChatGPT are being used more, right now, because they're just text-based, they have a huge amount of different use cases and applications, but they're limited because it's currently just only the things that OpenAI have been able to innovate on. But now that you have the MCP protocol and Apps SDK, where you have UI within ChatGPT, it suddenly unlocks infinite use cases that can be built on top of them as a platform. And as you've seen, where you could have Spotify, integrated, for example, where it just appears when you want your playlist, that gives you less and less reason to leave. And so over time, as more and more rich use cases happen, more apps are available, you can do more within ChatGPT. You have less and less reason to leave, meaning that they become the core platform. And so that's the expectation that we have over time. And I think that it also talks to really just the beginning of how we're going to start having UI within LLMs. So far, they've only really been text-based. And so I think we'll look back at this as almost like Yahoo for the internet era, right? When LLMs only had text. It's going to feel very old very quickly. And we even have all of the model labs. They are, they've been focused on text-based generation, but they're also working on video. And I think this will be one of the biggest areas where these model or these labs really differentiate from each other, because the video models are much more complex. But what they allow you to do is have basically instant UI generation, and that can be one-to-one personalized. So you'll start to have incredible apps that are developed basically, and incredible experiences. And something that I would encourage you to do, if you're in ChatGPT and it's not too late, you've got an app that they made called Year in Review. And I would definitely suggest checking that. If you within your ChatGPT and type year in review, you should have it pop up. And that's a whole amazing experience that they've done in there. And it's a really good example of an app. You can get it full screen. It generally feels amazing when you throw through it, but also it's doing it based off its memory and understanding of you. So it uses your memory, it uses your context, and shows the power of what you can do with that amount of data and how different it feels from your traditional GPT.
Oh, before we go into what to build, how to build, it's very useful if you can just understand at a high, at a high level, how exactly do these apps appear when we're talking to ChatGPT? What is the process? This is important also because when you get into the building phase, when we get our hands dirty with code, even though LLMs are very smart, if you can understand what's happening, you're going to be able to debug, you're going to build smarter apps, you're going to think more creatively. So just having that 101 level of how do apps work, it's going to get you a long way. And I've created an illustration to essentially upskill you within a few minutes. So when you're talking to ChatGPT and you type something like, a booking, can you look for a hotel? ChatGPT and the agent, and this is tech that OpenAI has built, is intelligent enough to know, okay, we need to talk to an external service, and in this case, it would be booking.com. So they're going to do a call to a computer that Booking owns. It's called an MCP. I'll cover that more in a moment. And they're going to return a bunch of data. Okay, well, they wanted to know about a hotel in New York City for January 1st. These are a bunch of options. Now, in the past, this data would have come back and ChatGPT would have just laid it all out in a long text, a lot of emojis, a lot of those dashes, right? And this is something that has kind of been in ChatGPT for a couple of years. They used to call them connectors. You could connect your Gmail, you could connect a whole bunch of apps, and they'd be able to bring in text. Now, with apps, we introduce kind of a third element to this flow, which is something called an app widget. So instead of just returning text, the MCP server will also tell ChatGPT, hey, let's also show this widget, which is just a piece of front-end code. And that will come back in the response. And ChatGPT will also show this widget. So now instead of just text, you're going to see kind of like it's called an iframe. It's like a little box that will fit nicely just in line in a chat, but you can also make it full screen. You could do something called picture in picture. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Kind of create that immersive experience inside ChatGPT. So if we go one level deeper, how exactly does it work? So that message then goes into something called an MCP server. So this is something, if we use the booking example, they have built. It doesn't belong to ChatGPT. It's essentially bookings, database of hotels, but they have something they inside called tools, right? So one tool may be look up a hotel. It's kind of a simple function and these tools, they can do anything. This is where we can get very creative. So for instance, it could, look up in a database they own. It could connect into a Gmail, look up emails. It could connect into an N8N workflow if you're familiar. Those are great tools for automations. You can have it create an image in an AI image generator. You can have it log in into an external service like Twitter or something. And essentially, this is going to be any business logic that the app owner wants to create happens here in this MCP server. Now, what's new is, it will kind of come back with the answer to the question that ChatGPT asked, but it will now add something here called OpenAI output template. And it will kind of give string, which kind of is the instructions of, I want to show the user this in an app widget. Don't put text, show the user in an app that we have created. And the key here is template. So what an app developer has to do is they have to develop these front-end widgets, their templates, that can then be kind of packaged together with the data. And when you send both at the same time, it shows up. Essentially, that's kind of the magical process here. The user will see, and with the booking example, a nice kind of scrollable experience with the hotel options, and there could be like a link into booking, right? This is really anything you can think of. They're using React, which is the same tool that pretty much every modern website is built on. If you've ever seen it in a website, it can likely be in this little widget, which can be shown in ChatGPT. So if you want to go a little bit deeper on the tech, I can recommend a good blog by Alpic. It gets more technical, goes into the actual code. I do really recommend that you get a good, solid understanding. I think we'll also share our Discord, Elliot. So if you have any questions on how the tech works, we're happy to answer them directly too. But if you can understand this process, MCP server, widgets, which are templates, merge them together, that's what creates an app. I think you do have a solid starting point. And what we're going to develop today is what we have highlighted here. So we're going to have to create an MCP server where we're able to kind of like answer the questions that comes from ChatGPT, including a tool. And then we're going to define that tool to also serve a template, a widget template, which we're also going to develop. When we bring that together, we have completed a full app.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, super useful to see it structured and how it technically works, because like you said, very important to have this understanding before getting into any of the other steps. And I think actually what you mentioned there around the tools and the potential tools that you can call, really it can be anything. And like you said, even an API, for example, like Nano Banana, which I think the image models and what you can do there is just got so many use cases in of itself. And there's obviously many examples. And actually, I think goes quite nicely onto the next section, which is about, well, what do you actually build? There's a ton of different use cases. And so we're going to run through, first of all, like, how do you think about ChatGPT apps? And then we're going to run through some examples of that so that you can sort of just bring to life, okay, I get it. Because I think the key difference here, and yeah, I think if we can jump into the UI principles that OpenAI have done, because they've actually given some thinking here on how to think about ChatGPT apps. Because the first call out is to say, this is very different from another kind of app. Many people that are watching this have probably developed or understand web apps, the same with mobile apps. It is definitely not an exercise of put my website into ChatGPT or put my mobile app into ChatGPT. It works fundamentally differently, just like you wouldn't have a mobile app in the same way that you have a web app. You need to think about it in a separate way. And so I think setting that understanding of how these apps work and the best use cases is important. And so there's some principles here that I think we can run through. And actually, Vince, we can go, first of all, like definitely check out this doc and we'll share it with you. And then we can even go back to the other screen because I put them in the board and then added some additional ones as well. So when they're talking about these principles, I think the first one to understand is they say extract, don't port. And what they're really doing there is they're saying don't try and kind of the point I was mentioning around just putting your website into ChatGPT. You want to think about actually what is the feature that's useful to surface rather than actually just having your whole website. And I think I can show just now, if I share my screen, a really good example of this, which is Photoshop's app. So we're on a site called Apps on ChatGPT, and this is the simulator where you can look at, for this particular app, how does it work? And you can see here, many of you will know Photoshop's, technology and platforms. They are very complicated. And so if you want to go and, for example, get this image to, look more vibrant, you're going to have to understand all the technicalities of their system, which frankly is complex. What it's doing here is it's taking one feature and then within the context window, just helping you do that one particular thing. And that's obviously a way different framing of how to think about how this app could be useful. So the first takeaway is you want to make sure that it's feature specific. It's extracting what are the important tools and features that you want to bring in rather than having your whole app be present there. And one thing to mention,
Just
don't let
one
that.
thought on Photoshop. It really is a very smart app because I think we've all experienced opening Photoshop and just being overwhelmed, right? You've got
Yeah.
500 buttons, right? And then Ellie, like you said, I want to make it more vibrant. It's a very natural language entry point. Like I just want to do this. We might even say it at our computer out of frustration. But with the ChatGPT app, that actually now becomes possible. Just do what I want, and the app will be able to take that logic, put that into the right tool, as we just discussed, take the action, and show it to the user right in the chat. So I think it's a very beautiful example of even very complex apps. It's really about the intent and the natural language entry point that create phenomenal experiences.
And one thing also to call out is don't think that that's the only thing the Photoshop app by Adobe does. So it's not like you need to just pick one feature. There's something called tools. And Vincent will get into this when he's doing the build. Tools are different functionalities of the app. And so, one functionality of Photoshop can be add vibrancy, and then it will do that. Another one can be blur the background. Another one can be make it black and white. You can pick the core features and it can do all of those things, but they're only going to get triggered once someone prompts it, and then just that feature and workflow will show, extracting all the kind of complexities around it. Now, another one is design for conversational entry. Now, this is talking mainly about basically making sure that you fit within people's workflow. So there's various different things that people are going to be going for. Some might just have some like open-ended prompts. Some might have more direct commands. And you also have, the first time onboarding onto an app that's also important to think about. But generally, the best way to think about it is you need to just fit within that workflow. And Photoshop did another good example of this, where if someone asked, like, can you blur the background of this app, you are just pulling the feature that helps with the blur background, and it continues in their workflow till it's done. And then maybe they want to use that image for something else. But it's very much a fit within the workflow rather than them just bringing Photoshop in there, because then there's all these different possibilities and it's not specific to the workflow. So how can your tool be specific to the workflow, and what are the prompt entries there? And another one is just making sure that you're optimized for the conversation rather than navigation. I'll just like recap that one. This next one around conversation rather than navigation, it's about making sure that it's like a conversational narrative rather than you having different UI buttons that are trying to get them to do different stuff. They don't feel like the UI appear and then suddenly you need back buttons and forward buttons and refresh and stuff like this. It should all fit within a conversational workflow, because that's what ChatGPT is focused on, getting things built within the conversation. Another one as well is, and I quite like this way of framing about it, is thinking about what are painful handoffs that you can make more easy. So a lot of you will be using ChatGPT. Something that like I personally use it for is to help with meal prep for a week. And something that I'm doing right now, if I'm helping it to get me to make meals, let's say it lists out a load of ingredients, I then have to actually go and find those ingredients, write them down on my notes, go to the shop or order them online, things like this. That's a painful offload, right? I'm leaving ChatGPT, but I might not have to. So instead of having to leave, you can have an app that fits there. And that's why I love Instacart as an example. And I can share what that looks like. You have, this is what Instacart looks like when you're in it within ChatGPT. And so once you call it, you can then say, for example, where you would want to shop, you can say all the ingredients, and then basically you can just, choose where to get it from, and then you can actually get in the ingredients as well. And so it's automatically going to add it here. You can see the ingredients list, and that just means you have got all your stuff you're going to order, and then you can see the ingredients list here. So I've not had to leave to actually go and check out on all of the stuff within my shop. So good example of like a painful workflow, and actually how you can just have an app that fits in there and gets you to complete that experience. Another few just quick ones to go through. I think memory and context is really important. So ChatGPT obviously knows you, depending on particularly if you've set memory or not, but it has a really good understanding of you and everything that you put in there, particularly if you use it a lot. That's true of all the 850 million users on the platform. So if you can think of good use cases that are really bringing in that memory, or how your app could leverage that memory to make their experience better, that's something that's really good to do. On top of that, context. If you are fitting in their workflow, naturally, the context of what they've been discussing before can be things that you bring in. So, for example, if you want to look at an app like Canva, what they do is they give a neat example. So you can see here, like it can generate you a presentation, and that presentation will just exist within the chat window. What it could do is you could have asked it first, create me some ideas around how I could best present this new idea that I have to my team. You're going to be brainstorming the words and the format. How does the idea structure? And you go, great. Now that I've got this document, I want to turn that into a presentation. Now, Canva needs to have the context of the conversation, which it does. But now it's able to use that context to generate something useful. And so you can think about that for your app as well. How could you fit into that context workflow? Or how could you, you know, better leverage that to bring out a really good feature of your app?
We know one of the biggest B2C uses of GPT is, like personal guidance, a lot of, helping you with your own goals. I think, like a pretty obvious use case that, we're going to see an app do well here is something like a habit tracker. You can kind of like say, hey, ChatGPT, I wanna like run a marathon in a month. There's an app that can track. You could say every day, I did 10K or I had a hard day. And it brings in, maybe something like a Strava has expert coaches, right? But you're able to just talk very naturally, but you're able to achieve something that in the past you would need to learn some sort of UI. You'd have to maybe make an account, right? It all becomes much easier, but you have that context of this is, Elliot, a goal you have, and we're tracking it in an app kind of contextually. That would just make a lot of sense.
And two other ones just to quickly mention. Think about it. I think this is quite good framing. Sort of use ChatGPT as distribution rather than infrastructure. So again, you aren't supposed to port your whole app into ChatGPT, your web app or your mobile app. You're supposed to bring in specific features, and you're supposed to. The good framing of it is to think, great, ChatGPT, because I've gone within this workflow, and this, let's assume, because you want to target big workflows, what are the highest volume of prompts and workflows that people are putting in that align to your app and your use case? You want to target those. And then the idea is that gives you the free distribution. You are the one that's there under the prompt on a large volume. And then once they've used you, it's then how can they then go to your app? So we're going to talk about monetization in a second, but you want to think about it like a distribution angle. You've been the app that appears, you've created something really useful, and then it's going to export to your full experience because they understand, oh, cool. I've been told to use Lovable to build my website. That's interesting. Now I now know about Lovable. And then if you want to complete the web build, you can go to Lovable's full app.
If you want some insights on what are people asking ChatGPT, OpenAI actually has released a bit of research. I think limited data sets, roughly what percent of people are asking for information, what percent of people. I think there's about 20 different categories just to help you also understand, what are people actually asking about to kind of get a feel for where are some good app opportunities.
And then, yeah,
I think we can
the
link
final
that.
one is just to say, yeah, we can link that. It's really good report. Just chuck it into ChatGPT as well and get a summary because you can visualize the data quite easily as well. And it's really interesting. You can backwards engineer what people might want. And then, final one's just test and iterate with real data. You want to actually, well, kind of like to this last point, make sure that you are, particularly once the app's live and you're able to see which tools people are using. Because right now, that's why it's great that the apps that are there so early, and they're fortunate in that they have this data. They can see, if you're Photoshop, for example, which of the tools are people calling, i.e. are people asking for blur effects, for changing a background effect. What are the different things in Photoshop people are asking for? And then they can understand, oh, okay, this is how we're going to fit into people's workflows. So you want to gather as much data as possible, also understand things like prompt volume and the distribution effects, combine that together, and then understand where to focus.
Great. So with that, let's look at some of these principles and decide what are we going to build today. One very good resource, which I'll open up now, is the Apps on ChatGPT, which is essentially a public resource to help builders with everything on apps in ChatGPT. There's a bunch of very good resources on inspiration, building apps, getting discovered, but there's also a very good directory of just what are the apps out there and what do they look like. So it's a very neat way to kind of look, okay, what are some cool use cases? How might this apply to my industry? What am I already thinking about?
One
We
quite
talked
cool
about the
one, Vince,
Instacart. Yeah.
one quite cool thing we could show people actually is on the main landing page and the different categories of apps, because it's quite expansive in terms of what you can build.
Yeah, so like there's obviously some games which is very interesting. And one thing my mind goes to in terms of cool experience is one of the official examples OpenAI released right on day one is something called Solar System, which it goes full screen. It's kind of a cool immersive experience. You see, I can with my mouse kind of drag and click. I can go here and then it goes to Jupiter. I can kind of explore around. There is Venus. And the cool thing about this kind of full screen UI is that you can see the chat bar stays visible. So I think this opens up a lot of cool opportunities, especially when you combine this with games. And one game that I like to nerd out on is called GeoGuessr. If you're not familiar with it, it's just a game that drops you randomly in the world on a Google Maps pin, and you kind of have to figure out where you are. So you look around, you look at like, okay, what languages do I see? Oh, are there any signs? What's the architecture? And then you guess. I think it would be pretty interesting to maybe build something like this where we get dropped randomly, but then instead of the GeoGuessr UIs, which is where you kind of like click on a map, you chat, be like, hey, are we in Argentina? And then the agent can either say that's correct or maybe give you some hints, or maybe, you're trying to understand like, hey, I see blue license plates, is that something that happens in Argentina? You can kind of like also have a conversation and use the knowledge the agent has to make that game more conversational.
On, let's do it.
Cool. So if we want to do that, I think it would be a nice little showcase. We can lock in that idea and we can go ahead and get started with building. Obviously, there's so many things you can build. Maybe smart to just take an app that already exists, try to build it yourself. For instance, something simple like the tracker, right, which is very simple, just tracking something and saving it and making that conversational. Or you could try to build something a little bit more complex with a checkout. And that might also be a good segue, right? Because Elliot, before we get into the build, we also wanted to briefly talk about how could you potentially monetize this, right? If you're a business or if you're, let's say, a Shopify store and you want to sell your products inside a conversational interface, what are the options there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is something that I think is really worth thinking about. And maybe first, Vince, we could go to let me I can share. Just back on apps in ChatGPT briefly. What you can see here when you go down is like these are just some of the different use cases that you can have. So you've got commerce here, and commerce, what they mean is that you are generally transacting directly within the window. You've got a load of business applications, and there are many of those that you can actually see when you are in the ChatGPT App Store. They're mainly productivity. So these are just a few of them, but you've got a pizzeria, for example. So they're actually getting their pizza ordered. And then you've also got games that we spoke about, and then the experimental piece was just the sun piece. So there's just a lot of variation in terms of these use cases, and definitely browse around. And I think the reason that's interesting is then to think about, why are these companies doing this, and what are the opportunities that there are to eventually monetize? Because I think that's broadly what we want to be thinking about. How can it be beneficial to a business? But I want to encourage people to think about this not necessarily just in terms of direct monetization. So in terms of why would you build a ChatGPT app and how to think about it, there's broadly three areas that we think are quite interesting. First of all is discoverability. There's then loyalty and retention, and then there's direct conversion. And we'll talk about the two methods that they've got here. Firstly, just to mention discoverability. So there's going to be, like you said, 850 million users, a huge amount of people that can get surface area for your app. There's going to be two areas where it can be found. Either they are going to look in the ChatGPT App Store because they're looking to develop a certain use case, or the more exciting one is as they do a prompt, below the answer, an app is going to appear. And so you are getting organic distribution. That just for context, like, yes, you could do SEO in Google, but in the mobile app store doesn't happen at all. You only have to go and find apps. And so this is a super exciting early distribution opportunity. And when someone then uses your app, they might use it for free at the start, but they then could convert later down the line. So what you might find is that, you do what's called an external payment, where they do the first use case using your ChatGPT app. And then from there, what they do is that they would go and want more features. So they actually go to the full browser version of your application and then end up converting because they're using you more. But they heard about you because of like one feature within your ChatGPT app that they really liked. And maybe Vince, do you want to talk about loyalty and retention? Because I know you've been thinking about this one.
Take an app like Canva. We're pretty used to the desktop app or the UI, but as consumers' expectations become more and more centered around, having an AI assistant, it's going to become increasingly critical for existing products and services to also have a presence on the ChatGPT App Store. And you can imagine a scenario where if companies don't shift and create kind of the experiences where your customers want them, they may eventually just choose a new startup, a new incumbent that has become more AI native. So there's a huge, I think, push for a lot of big companies, and I think that's why you're seeing all these big brands kind of be first movers here to define AI native experiences to also retain users as expectations will inevitably continue to shift over the next coming years.
So basically making sure that you have a presence there so that you stay relevant as more people eventually expect that experience. And when we then talk about direct monetization, there's two things to think about. So you can actually, and I can open this up now. So OpenAI have released a specific document which is on monetization. And they basically, I won't go through this, which is why I'd sort of drawn it out onto the main page, but you've got external checkout as one option, or you've got instant checkout, which is in private beta. Now, the external checkout just means that everything around a checkout experience is going to be hosted outside of the platform. So, like on our website or app, it will handle the pricing, the payment, subscription, fulfillment, all that piece. With the instant checkout, it actually all happens within the experience. And so there's good examples of this with things like Instacart, for example, who's one of the main apps that has this experience already. And in short, what they're doing is they are using the payments protocol that exists underneath it. And really at the beginning, what they're only doing is focusing on marketplaces, and it is very much a private beta. I think Instacart got chosen, the CEO of applications at OpenAI used to work at Instacart, so it kind of makes sense. And they are using that. But then I think the important thing to know is that it's going to be a while, I think, till that's open more broadly. So if you want to directly monetize it, so you do just have a very good flow that can get people to convert, you want to be doing it on your own platform. Even if you're early in the commerce space, it's going to take a while to be accepted there. So these are the two flows, like I said, mainly focus on external checkout first, as that's going to be where people can monetize at the start, I think, at least for, let's say, maybe Q1 or something like this, or the early months of next year.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and let's build the app. So we're going to build this live. Nothing has been prepared. We only just came up with the use case. So you can follow along directly. You can try to use this video to create your own use case. Let's go ahead and kind of preview what are the steps we're going to take.
I also thought something that we could do is
So
we could also just show people GeoGuessr. I don't know if people are familiar with GeoGuessr, probably, but you could even just Google it
yeah, I
quickly and
think
just
it's
show
a
people.
nice to kind of to show what frame quickly what the experience is, right? So you'll get dropped anywhere from busy streets to New York to the beautiful beaches of Bali. 100 million players. Wow.
Yeah.
I know this game is huge. It's really fun, by the way. If you have any kind of nerdy geography side, this will really you'll love it. But just to
But you
illustrate the experience, they don't
effectively,
really have great
yeah, I was going to say.
screenshots. It kind of looks like this. You get dropped here. This is probably somewhere in Southeast Asia. Yeah, look, it's the Philippines. You as a user, you're gonna have to guess where it is. This is a great experience, right? There's nothing wrong with this game. I think it'll be fun to build because we can literally build this inside ChatGPT. And instead of having this map here, I think the challenge is how can we also train the agent, make it fun so that you can interact with them, and maybe it can give you clues, maybe it can help, especially with these more challenging ones where you maybe be able to ask, there's a certain brand motorcycle here. You could ask like, well, is this brand motorcycle present in Vietnam? And then they say no, and then maybe it's not Vietnam, right? So you can kind of become a bit of like a detective, and then eventually you might lock in a guess. Eventually you might give up, and then I think, one aspect we're going to have to be very careful is how can we make sure that the agent knows you're playing the game and doesn't give away the answer unless you ask, right? So there's going to be a little bit of context we're going to have to think about when we're creating this app. Let me go ahead and talk a little bit about how we're going to do this. We're going to talk about all the tools you're going to need. There's 6 different tools and setting them up. Then we're going to write a prompt. This is going to be a vibe coding approach. Vibe coding is getting, I think, increasingly sophisticated. And this is also the hack. If you have never built an app, you need to put the agents to work. But the knowledge now is how do you put them to work effectively? So we're going to show you how to do that today. And we're going to be building the app hopefully pretty quickly. We're going to test and iterate it in a tool called MCP Jam. I'll talk about that more in a moment. Once we're happy, we're also going to test it in actual ChatGPT. We're going to open ChatGPT and see what it looks like, and we're going to show you how you can do that before you have officially submitted it. And then if we're happy, we'll consider it done, and we're going to host it. We'll talk about how you do that and go into submission. Because this is live, we haven't done this, I haven't built this. Things may go wrong, right? I think, we could, if you're interested to see it step by step, please keep watching. I think we may be able to also flag in the video where maybe some errors pop up, and you can either choose to skip those or you can follow along, because things potentially will go wrong, right? And then I think it's also useful for our viewers to understand, okay, what do you do when something isn't working, right? How do we diagnose it? How do we fix this? So that's something I can't predict, but it's something we'll discover as we go along.
I think something to just call out is when Vincent mentions vibe coding is, for anyone that's like less familiar with developing, it's incredible now what you can do, particularly with these frontier models, and anyone can develop. I'm a really firm believer in that. All you need to know to develop is to know how to prompt. And so, I'm someone that is completely non-technical, but can totally build these kind of applications. And so we'll do a live build today where we even go through some of the errors and stuff like this, skip the sections you want to, but we'll also highlight in the comments some really good videos if you want to upskill on just vibe coding itself, because it's an incredible skill. And, the better you are at that, the easier this kind of stuff becomes.
The first tool you'll need if you want to vibe code or really code anything in this age of AI is Cursor. You may have heard of it. It's just a desktop app. You can download it on Mac and Windows. And this is a coding editor. So this is where you can write code. What differentiates it is it has the ability to have AI models natively understand every line of code you write and also write the code for you. You can insert any model. We'll recommend which ones to use. But if you don't have Cursor yet, this is a must-have. So download it, set up an account. I think they have a decent free tier, but I think to use some of the better models, you do need to pay. I don't think the subscription is a lot. I would recommend that. You're just going to get better quality code. If you have never developed something on your laptop before, you're going to have to install something called Node.js. And well, it's essentially a packaged JavaScript. It's a coding language. It doesn't come standard. You can go to Node.js. You can just download it, install it. I'll talk before we start. We'll verify that we have it installed. But without this, we cannot build the apps we want to build. So it's just one of those prerequisites. Tick it off, and then you'll be able to build anything after you have this installed. Then we have a tool called MCP Jam. This is a great tool. We have ngrok, another great tool, and I'm going to talk a little bit now about why we would need both of those. So we're going to develop on our machine, right? Cursor is a desktop app. We build that code and it lives on our machine, essentially just in a file. How do we quickly test that, I'm able to open a Google map and I can see that I'm able to look around, like quickly test that the experience I intend to create is being, done with the app. You could always try to get it live into ChatGPT, but that takes a long time. And we're going to go through that process, but you need to do quite a bit of configuration. Ideally, you want to test it quickly. You just want to quickly write the code, press enter, and be able to see it. So MCP Jam solves that problem. You can instantly see changes that you're developing in a local desktop app. So MCP Jam, I'll quickly open it. You can just download it, Mac or Windows. I think they may also have a browser version, but desktop apps always feel really good. You can see that there's kind of a simulated AI agent here, and you're able to quickly see your app. You're able to test different screen sizes because you're going to want to make sure it also looks good on mobile. You'll be able to go into dark mode as well. Some devices are dark at night, or users choose to see them in the dark, right? So you can very quickly just check off, hey, this app is doing what I want, without kind of going through the whole process of getting it live in ChatGPT. Now, eventually, once we're happy, we said we would get it live in ChatGPT. For that, we still have the problem that the code lives on our computer. ChatGPT has a requirement, and here just we need to get that logo, that they want the app to be hosted on a server. Your computer isn't natively a server. So what that means is they want to have a public URL ChatGPT can talk to, like, an actual internet URL, or it won't accept it. So there's a neat little tool called ngrok. This creates something called a tunnel, and it creates a real web URL that is connected to your computer. And that kind of solves the gap. So it's kind of a quick fix, like a quick band-aid to get the app you have created on your laptop into ChatGPT just to verify that everything is working well. And then the very last step and last tool we'll need is a way to host it. We're happy. We want to kind of make it permanent, put it on a real server so that will always be available for ChatGPT to chat to talk to kind of, you know, answer the questions, the tools like we've discussed, load the widget templates. We're going to use two tools for this. One is GitHub, the other one is Alpic. GitHub is a must-have. If you're not familiar with GitHub, we'll link a very good intro video. I think a very easy mental model is it's essentially a Google Drive for code. It's a way to get the code you've written kind of permanently put in a place that's accessible yourself as a developer, but also for hosting tools. Because once we have this on GitHub, it'll be a very simple kind of one click to get it hosted. In this case, we'll use kind of a specialized MCP hosting tool. We'll talk about why that's useful once we get into it, called Alpic. And this is just totally web-based. So you just create an account, and it'll be very easy to get kind of this all live. And then we'll be ready to submit it to the App Store. Before we actually begin with the development, I want to talk a little bit about some of the best practices and guardrails we're going to implement also to ensure that when we're prompting, we're going to get high quality. But since the launch, which is really only 2, 3 months ago, early October, we've seen a number of really smart teams quickly develop frameworks or development kits, make the original kind of, code and docs from OpenAI a lot easier, a lot more professional. And one one good framework that I played around with is called Skybridge. It really simplifies building apps. It means less code, cleaner code, and it also follows a lot of the official kind of patterns that a lot of developers use for web apps kind of all over the internet. You don't have to know too much about it. I do recommend, if you're more technical, to look at the docs, and we'll use them today. But I also want to call out that they're one of a couple, I think, very good tools we're seeing emerge very early on the market. No doubt there will be other really good ones. So if you're interested, be sure to check out also sunpeak.ai, Fast Apps. And we're going to actually develop with real code, but we're also starting to see some very good lovable type products. If you prefer to just prompt or kind of create an app with a more no-code experience, we're seeing tools like Fractal also emerge that create an experience that also are, something that's going to probably become very prominent for a lot of people building apps. There is also on the apps on chatgpt.com a tool directory. So this is where you can already see, I think there's dozens of tools that are emerging where you can get an overview of what are all the tools available for development, what do they do. So you can kind of get a full bird's eye view, and maybe you want to explore a few different ones than the ones we're going to use today. So to make our lives easier, so for myself, and we will also share this to you, I created a starter kind of code base. And I'm going to quickly open. So this is hosted on GitHub, kind of that, Google Drive, or where you could have code repositories. And it's just kind of a minimal, you can kind of think of it as like a template where it already has a lot of the elements in place for us to very quickly build a good app. It has Skybridge, that framework we talked about, already natively in here. And more importantly, it has a lot of context that we can use for our coding agents to create very good apps. One thing that Cursor is trained on is being able to pick up from code what are the pieces of information that I need to know whenever the user asks me something. And they do this through something called an agents MD file. So you're going to find that. And you don't even have to open it, but it's good to know it's in there because this instructs your AI coding agent on, these are the things you have to know every time we're going to develop. And it's trained on a bunch of things. And here is a folder that it's trained on. It's trained on the full Skybridge agent docs. It's trained on the OpenAI design guidelines. So these come from the official OpenAI docs, detail exactly how you should make kind of the apps look professional in kind of the OpenAI official UI. It even has the different icons available you're seeing in the apps, right? So by kind of having this all available to a coding agent, it's not going to guess, right? You may have an experience where you type something into Lovable or an agent and it creates something that works, but maybe it looks awful. So this also immediately gets the UI in a way that, we can predict. And it also has, a few other smaller details that are going to be really important for when we submit to the App Store, making sure that we have proper something called annotations, descriptions. So this is going to be kind of like your cheat sheet to very quickly build a very good app without necessarily having to discover and iterate yourself. So we'll be linking this, and that's also what we'll be using today when we get into building the app.
Now, one thing just to mention as well, particularly if you've not coded before, it will feel like a lot, and there's quite a few tools here, but particularly because of the way that these agents or these platforms are being developed, they're becoming more and more simple over time. And you actually need to look at less and less of the code. So we're going to go through a setup process now. And once you have that set up, it's actually way easier to get in and just start that development process, particularly as we'll go through in Cursor. They have what's called an agent view, which honestly looks very similar to a ChatGPT-like interface. But you have this super powerful coding agent in the background, which I love. I personally use it rather than looking at the more complicated, typical CLI, or interface that you would have for developing. So yeah, we'll go through that process now, but it should all feel smooth. Particularly once you set it up, you'll get quite familiar with how it looks and feels, and it will become easier over time.
So let's go ahead and begin, and I will share entire screen because we're going to be switching between Cursor and MCP Jam. And we're going to go and open a new project, just call new folder, we'll call video, and we'll open. And now we're just in a fresh folder, just on our local computer. You can put this anywhere. It doesn't matter. It could be on your desktop. I put it just in my personal file system on Mac OS. Mac. Okay, so if this is your first time in Cursor, let me quickly help you navigate and understand what you're seeing. So you're going to see something that looks a little bit like a UI, like ChatGPT. You'll be able to input a prompt, and this is your coding assistant. At the bottom of this input, you're going to see a couple of very important choices you're going to be able to make, and one of them is the model. I believe the default, and so this may be what you're seeing is auto. I would highly recommend to turn that off and actually choose a specific model we're going to work with. There's a lot of very good coding agents on the market right now. I would recommend to use Opus 4.5. It's one of the best models that are available. It's native in Cursor, very strong reasoning, very high context windows, which means they can just go further without kind of being able to process more data. It is a little bit more expensive. I usually switch between Opus and Sonnet. If you're doing a lot of development, maybe something you'd want to think about. I think for today's purposes, we're happy to use kind of the best in class to call. Another thing to call out here are the modes. So there's something called agent mode. There's ask debug, which is actually a new one. I haven't even seen that one before, so that must be something they released like today. Agent. This is really, really important to use because if you're in agent mode, it's going to directly develop, right? So you ask it, hey, create an app in ChatGPT, it'll just go ahead and do it. We don't want to go that fast because we want to be quite meticulous about the planning. And this is really the key to good vibe coding. It's all in creating the prompt and giving it the right context. Cursor knows this, and this is why Cursor is such a useful tool. You're able to go into something called ask mode. The coding agent will only answer your questions, and you can iterate, kind of work on like, okay, well, what is going to be the perfect prompt to build this app? And plan mode, which is designed for creating multi-step complex plans. So, we may need to make that server component, then we need to make a front-end component, then maybe we need to create an API or something. Planning mode will kind of put that all together and create really clear instructions so that once you go to agent mode, it can very efficiently execute a very complex app. So to get started, the first thing we are going to do is begin with that starter template we discussed. To begin with the actual build, the first thing we're going to do is verify we got that Node.js installed correctly. And the way you can do that is simply type in node and then -v. So if you have installed that correctly, you're going to see a version number and make sure it's 22 or above. This is required for the starter template we're going to use. So if you just freshly installed it, you should be seeing 22 or above. If it's a lower version, I do recommend to upgrade it. Go to the website, look at the docs. They'll explain exactly how you do that. Well, the next thing we want to do is bring in the starter template. It's currently on that GitHub. We want to essentially just download it or get it from the GitHub into repository. So if you go to the GitHub, you're going to see this green button called code. And there is something you can just copy to the clipboard. That's the URL. And that's the URL that we can use to also just pull or download the code. And
And
it's easy just to ask the
to
agent
do
to
that,
do things like this.
yeah. And to do that, would someone needs to create an account first on GitHub?
No, no.
You can
So
just
you'll
download it
be able
direct.
to just pull this because it's a public repository. And then we can use the right word is to pull and then just type in the URL and make sure you're in agent mode because we actually want it to take an action. Right, so it looks like it's successful. There's a button here on the top right. If you don't see anything on the left, I would push that button because it's going to show all the different kind of files and code in kind of the file structure format. And it's a good visual verification that everything that was in here, so agent resources, server, web, agent resources, server, web, it's now here. Now it's useful to also just quickly verify that the starter template is working. If it's not, then something is going very wrong because at this point you have not coded anything. So it's very good to just know we're starting from a point where everything is working. And you can go into the README, which explains exactly how you can see if everything is working. But the coding agent, I think, was smart enough to even give us the instructions. We're going to have to run two commands. We do this in the terminal. I see I've already opened it, but just to remind or kind of go over it again, if you don't see a terminal on the top right, you can open another toggle panel on the bottom. Go ahead and open this, and it will automatically go into something called a terminal, which is essentially just a way to kind of talk to the code, right? So We want to maybe like simulate that it's starting, right? We want to tell it, okay, start the app. It's essentially like a button, but this is kind of how developers talk to their code. We're going to have to run two commands, npm install, so just copy paste it. And this is installing essentially all the parts that it needs to run. It'll only take a few seconds. And then npm dev, and this is starting the app on our machine. But now it's actually live. We can't see it because we're not using a tool to simulate it. That's why we'll switch to MCP Gem in a moment. But we should be seeing what you're seeing here, where the server is listening on port 3000 development and no errors. That means you have already successfully started a real ChatGPT app on your machine. So this is, if you've made it this far, very good. I think you've already done a lot of the hardest heavy lifting, especially if this is your first time. You've had to set up quite a few tools, but from here it's going to get fun because now we're going to actually get into the real building of the app. I do
Yeah, and
think it's
also
good.
feel free
You have MC. Go ahead.
just to mention, I think feel free also just in this next section to, if you've already used the beginning of this video to think about an idea and to have a good understanding of what you want to build, either you can use the rest of the video to follow along with the build that we're doing, just to, you know, try and develop it yourself live, which I think is a really good thing to do. But if you've got an idea in mind, feel free to just follow along that process as well. So whatever version works for you.
Make sure in cursor you don't touch this. You leave this running. This needs to stay untouched. And then open the MCP Gem and let's connect to the app that we're running right now from our cursor app. So we're going to have to go into the top left and go into servers, your first server. Let's just call it, Geo. You're going to see a connection type and we're going to do HTTP. This keeps it kind of on our machine. We're going to do HTTP localhost 3000 slash MCP. Make sure you type it exactly like this. No authentication. You add the server and it should pop up and you should be able to see connected. Now it's listening or kind of connected to our cursor. And go into chat. This will be a way to quickly test that also the UI component is working. So the whole kind of three parts of the triangle, it's all here. So the starter kit natively has a tool called Hello, which all you have to do is type in hello. It will see, okay, you said hello, we want to answer with a specific widget that, just responds to that. So just type in hello, and we should be able to see that we're going to see an actual UI widget from this starter template. There you go. We're seeing an actual widget that could also appear in actual ChatGPT, and it's just a basic, template. We're going to play around with this. We're going to probably even delete this. We don't need it. But the nice thing is that you kind of have the code patterns and examples that a coding agent can then repurpose the use case that we're actually looking to build.
Yeah.
It even, I
And this
think,
is,
has a night mode that we can play with. We can
mm,
make it, like this is called picture in picture. So like we're able to keep chatting and this stays here, right? Kind of just shows off some of the functionalities that we could play around with.
yeah. And this is really good. So, you won't have gone through the full process yet, but testing these ChatGPT apps is difficult because you have to do full publish and then you have to access developer mode. Just doing it within this kind of environment allows you to really quickly understand, just based on something you've prompt, what the new experience is. So big lifesaver, and definitely a tool you wanna make sure that you have set up. So Vince, before we start the build as well, I think it'd be good to just walk through everything that we're seeing here, because I know there's, like, we've obviously set everything up and that was fairly easy to walk through, but as we start to build the application, like, where exactly is the agent? Where should I be prompting? I know we got a terminal here, which is kind of like a normal developer reference that sometimes you have to use. Then there's like a place to view your
Yeah.
files, but it'll be good to know what the different components are here just visually so we can easily use cursor.
And to make it more complex, cursor can be visually recreated in many different ways. So like there's this switch agent side, right, where it puts the agent on the left rather than the right. It can you can kind of toggle things on and off. So, this might become a good ChatGPT app one day because it's one of these apps that you're going to have to take a little bit of time to understand, okay, what are all the little sections I'm seeing and what are they doing? The core cursor is a coding editor. Here we have different of code, and we're able to kind of see them. We can see the actual code. We don't really have to look at this much. So that's the beauty of vibe coding. We're really going to be working with an agent, and Cursor has an agent kind of side panel, which is here, the agent sidebar. And this is where we have that kind of interaction where we're able to either work for us, plan. Cursor is also able to work with multiple agents. So just like in ChatGPT, you might have multiple. Here we could have, we could rename this even to like our setup agent. We used it for setting up the GitHub, right? And kind of getting everything started. Maybe we start a new agent here we're going to use for our planning. On the left here, we just kind of see an overview of all the different files in our repository. And you pointed out, a very important piece here is the terminal. And that's where we're going to actually type in commands and we want to start, mostly just starting the app, getting it into that mode where the server is running and we're able to kind of listen to it on MCP Jam, or later we're going to type in some commands to get ngrok started. But we're also going to see errors. And, if something is going wrong, the terminal also will kind of tell you, okay, something went wrong. And it gives you information on what went wrong so you can go ahead and do something called debugging. So hopefully that is a good kind of
Yeah,
high
I think
level
that's good. And
overview.
maybe maybe
But I
maybe I
understand
can
that this
just
could be
also.
confusing.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I can maybe just quickly show, I'll share my screen and I'll just show you how, like, I'm like as someone non-technical that's also gone through the process of now being able to do like a large percentage of my work in cursor and code, how I use the tool. So this is how my cursor would typically look. So when you first open it up and you go to, for example, like a new window, and then you want to open up a project, I can go into, this file, for example, it will open up a window like this. And then I like to have it so that I can just ask my agent anything here. And then as I, you know, ask it something like create me a very short file, that will run. And then it will put it and visualize it just on the right hand side here. And then as I need to actually just, go into the terminal, I can just lift it up from the bottom here. So you can see here it's quite a nice interface because you've got like agents down the left where you prompt, and then anything you need to sort of visualize just here as well.
Keep going. Well, like I said, we're going to get into the more fun part. Before we do that, let's stop this local server because we're going to be writing code. We're going to need to update the server anyways. And the way you can do that on Mac is Command C, Control C. I think Windows will be the same. And you're going to just see it's ended it, right? So we're able to type something back into terminal. We can restart it. And now we're going to essentially begin brainstorming on what is the app we want to build? What is the experience? So we're going to do this live. I'm going to make sure we are in mode. And let's go ahead and, we can do this together, Elliot. Want to build app chat Muller, the game, Geo get the experience should be as a user like to play. The user sees a widget, random location in the world. We don't want it to be totally random, right? You'd want it to be not totally random. What if you end up on like a deep farm? We want it to be interesting of like city streets. It could be with buildings. It is nice if it's not too obvious, right? You don't want to be dropped in front of the Eiffel Tower. We just need to ensure visible. The user should then use let's keep it pretty simple to of the country location. User should, it's very important. Well, Elliot, do you think this is a good experience? Right now, we're really just thinking about what is the experience we want to.
Yeah.
We want them to be
I
dropped in
think
an interesting location. They should be able to chat with the agent. The agent cannot give away the answer. It's very important unless the user says something like they give up. And then after a game ends, the agent which should ask, do you want to play in other locations? Keep the flow going.
yeah. And I think principles to learn are, I always like to prompt LLMs in a way where you just directly get them to do what you want them to do. So for example, saying things like leverage the essence of GeoGuessr, but use your knowledge of ChatGPT Apps SDK and how best to get apps to work well within it to think about the best design of how GeoGuessr should be slightly changed for apps on ChatGPT. So you almost give it the framing and the thinking
Mhm.
to make sure that it then goes through the right process, and then giving it that detail. So I think adding in those kind of pieces into the prompt are good.
So I'm going to essentially bring in some of what you just said, Elliot. And I also just like to have an agent validate. I want to hear back from the agent that, you understand what I've said. And I'll always know if they have any question. There might be some
You want
things
to
I'm
just
missing or that are ambiguous.
I think just that. Don't worry.
Oh,
Yeah, and notice
they're
how
going to start
like
thinking.
it's in. Well, I was just going to say, notice. I think you called this out, but notice how it's in ask mode right now. And this basically means I don't know if we explained these in detail, but what you have when you're in ask mode is it won't actually generate any code. So it's almost like you're prompting and just generally getting it to ask a question. So it's just going to give you a response like this one here. So quite good if you're planning, basically.
So look, it started with let me first review the Skybridge framework, the design guidelines. We covered that this starter template has something called an agents.md. Again, you don't have to open it or understand it. But every time we talk to our coding agent, we're inserting that really important context of how do you build the app? What are the right patterns? What can it do? How do we design it per the official guidelines of OpenAI? So all of that is also considered when we ask a question. It would confirm some sort of understanding. I want to play GeoGuessr or similar. Shows a random street level image of an interesting location. City roads with, yeah, correct. Celebrate offer. Again, sounds good. Incorrect. Guesses, hint requested, provide progressive hints. That's very smart. It'd be very interesting if you know, the first hint is very subtle, right? Like something
Yeah, that's a good one.
about a language region. An I give up will reveal the answer. Never reveals the answer is very good. Questions. So where should the street level images come from? It gives a couple options. So it looks like we'll be able to make a decision on that. And then I think we need to go a bit wider. This table, pros and cons. It recommends to start with a curated static data set of 50 to 100 interesting locations. Gives you full, yeah, it's good. Then it asks questions on if there should be difficulty levels. Should we track score streaks? How many guesses before the game ends? And hints should be available. It recommends a picture-in-picture mode so that the user will be able to see the images while typing guesses. And maybe we can quickly go also an example. We go to ChatGPT. What does picture-in-picture mode look like? The app that uses it is Core. So you can kind of see you have the chat here. Here, there's kind of a floating widget stays while you chat. So I do think that's interesting, but when the solar system one was also interesting, where you're able to really be immersive. I think I'd actually like to test maybe both. My preference might go for the screen, right, where you're really able to kind of feel like you're in a location. I think that would be a more fun experience. Let's first answer the questions. For the where should the street level images come from? I think the Google Street View API makes the most sense, and I think that's also what GeoGuessr uses. It's probably the it's it. Look, I know that it's not free eventually, but I do think there's quite a generous free tier, and we're not expecting millions of users. So let's use the Google Street View API. It does mean we'll have to do a little bit of more setup because we're going to have to get an API key. Um, let's do no difficulty is for now. Let's try to keep the principle of an MVP. It would be something that we could add on later. And I would say the same thing for no keeping. So let's begin with creating the experience and testing that it's fun. For the three, let's do all of it. I think all of those are good hints. And for design, let's make it full screen. Ensure we can still full screen. It's a bit redundant because that's what ChatGPT does with full screen. We'll quickly browse. The rest are not questions. So I think at this point, we have a pretty good plan forming. And sometimes I'll go back and forth quite a bit because I'm trying to get to an outcome that I feel happy about. I think with this, I'm feeling pretty happy. And then what I'll typically do is I'll switch to this plan mode and essentially ask the agent, please consolidate into a full plan. Please create a full plan. So you'll see what it's going to do. It's going to do something quite interesting. It's going to actually create a file that is optimized for itself to build the full app. It's going to think from the very beginning, what are all the steps I need to take. And it's also going to instruct me, the human, on steps I need to take because it'll need, for instance, that Google Street View API. It looks like it actually has a few questions, which is a neat feature. It kind of pops up. We definitely want that 360 immersive. That's, I think, the whole point. No, I would have. Let's ask it for guidance. Perfect. We don't have that API yet. Pretty cool that it just offers.
I,
Thanks.
I love, yeah, it's great. And I love the UI where you can just select which of the actions you want it to proceed with. Very nice.
Yeah, so I've been kind of in the AI coding for well over a year, and the experience is just keep getting, leveled up every month, and you can kind of just see how easy this is getting. And these build plans are phenomenal, right? It created phases, so that first it's going to do an environment setup, and it's going to do a location database, the MCP server tools. We've discussed that, right? We're going to create that MCP, and it's going to define the different tools. So one of them going to be GeoGuessr, start a GeoGuessr game. So that's going to be the tool that's called when we want to start, and it's going to probably return a random location in a widget. The guess tool, right? Every time we guess, we need to get some sort of response on is that correct or not. The hint tool, the reveal answer tool, and it's going to essentially it's laid out everything. Like I said, it's designed for the agent itself. These are the instructions to itself to make sure that when it builds exactly that we have defined. So it will seems to be like it can just go ahead and get started. We are going to have to create a Google Maps API key. So I'm just quickly ask. So before you press this build, you can still chat with the agent and update the plan or modify it or validate something. Um, I want to actually validate this plan ensures the agent will not reveal the answer before the user give up. Please, and then needs to be the chat GPT. I want to be very specific. Please summarize, will this work? I'm quickly challenging it on, I think, one of the most important aspects. It's giving me a very technical answer. Love that it just creates a
Yeah.
whole
It's
chart.
crazy. Yeah, yeah. It's like quicker than you're blinking.
So actually, like this isn't the right vibe coding approach, but I'm just going to trust it. I think if you really want to do this well, you do take some time and keep asking until you understand, right? Because when you build an app, it's very important you understand that your critical assumptions are handled correctly. When should I make the Google Maps API? Did I do that? You build, we do that. Is it really just an order of operations question? Because otherwise we can go ahead and do that before, maybe during. So you know what we're going to do? I think we're going to get this agent started because it does take a minute or two. And in the meantime, we're going to get that key. So I'm actually going to say option 2. We're going to get key build. Where are the instructions? They kindly offered to want to take them up on that offer. Some good instructions. Go ahead and press build. And we're going to let that work. And then we're going to go get ourselves an API key.
Yeah. And I think something to mention as well is you'll notice how long we spent in the plan phase. So when you first do that ask, you are making sure you're just getting that initial clarification. And then you actually want to spend as long as you can, or as long as you feel completely comfortable planning. Because the better the plan is, these models are just so good that it really will be able to execute it. So at least to a very good extent. And then, you're doing, obviously having to do some debugging, but the debugging is far reduced, the better that your planning is. So great to spend, as long as you can on that.
During the build, it may ask for some human approvals. So just keep watching that. And then we're going to go ahead and get started with the instructions of the API key. Or in our console, we're going to click on the project dropdown, create a new project, with that creativity. Do want to add, if you don't have a billing account, you may need to make that. And then, yeah, so I did that kind of by reflex. Make sure you have a billing account added, has a generous free credit tier, so you're not going to expect to pay anything. Step 3, enable the Maps JavaScript API. So we're going to go to API and services. If you click on the left here, enable API and services. I'm going a bit quick through this. This is not, like you may have a different use case, right? So it's not relevant for everyone watching this video. Google Maps API. Yeah, looks like it's even already enabled. Oh, we didn't switch project. Yeah, to enable it, confirm something that I've never done before. Google overlords.
I'd definitely, recommend, if you've got questions and stuff as you go through this, let's say you're following us along and you're building out this use case, if you've got questions on getting set up with Google Cloud, it can be a bit complicated when you first look at it and getting all of this API stuff set up, because I honestly don't think the Google API platform and services is super intuitive. But yeah, if you follow all the steps on the screen, it should be fine. But shout in the comments if you have questions.
Oh, it just popped up and gave me my API key. And then we won't add any restrictions for now. You can just press maybe later. And then I just quickly pasted it here in the chat box. We're gonna hit our agent in a moment. We have our API key. Like you said, Elliot, not super intuitive. I'm going to just quickly confirm that this, I like to look twice, so this is enabled. I'm going to quickly go to credentials. I'm going to make sure that Maps API platform key. I'm going to quickly make sure that the billing is also multiple billing amounts. This should be good. I'm not going to close this. Sometimes some tricky things pop up with Google APIs. And while we've been doing that, our agent has been hard at work, and we're just going to let it finish its course. And you can see on the left, it has this to-do list was created in the plan, and it's just taking them off. It looks like it's doing the last thing, which is removing that example hello widget because it's served its purpose. And, it's actually asking me to build. You can just go ahead and press run. It's essentially seeing if what it's built is working. If there's errors, which I see there's like this cannot find, right? It actually will go ahead and debug itself a bit. Just keep allowing it to do that npm build. It's kind of its final check on its own code. I'm seeing some check marks. Awesome. Build complete. I see here it's created a location file. Interesting to open this, look around a bit. 47 curated locations, starting with the Champs-Élysées, the Amsterdam Dam Square. So that's that's 10 minutes from where I live. It looks like it did very famous tourist sites, which wasn't exactly what we prompted. This is something we can easily update later, right? This is just a list. Coordinates. It's created the Google Maps full screen view panorama widget. So that's going to be the interesting one we're going to test momentarily in MCP Jam. But before we do that, it gives instructions on add your Google Map API key, edit server.env and replace the placeholder with your actual key. You can ask the agent to do it, but I think it's fine to sometimes just to understand what the code is doing. You can go to server.env, replace the API key, but just calling out, we will delete this API key. Please make your own. We're not going to use all our free tier credits. And then it tells us to go ahead and start the dev server. So that's the same thing we did before. We were doing the example hello widget. Now we built the app. We may start to see some bugs and some errors, and we may not. We're going to go back into MCP Jam.
And I think worth just calling out. So if you're following along, you'll be in the same section as us now and just wanting to be back in MCP Jam and retesting. If you're developing another app, you potentially have already gone through some of the planned steps and are at the stage. Maybe you've had to integrate an API, maybe you've had to, get some of the build set up. Feel free to sort of skip to, I suppose, like do this section whenever you're ready to be testing with MCP Jam. And maybe you'll get some learnings on how we use MCP Jam to test whatever app you're building.
Quickly just turned on and off the server. I don't think you even have to do this. Just kind of feels it may, just make sure you're totally listening to the latest version of your server app. It's interesting to go to the tool tab because we can see the different tools our MCP server has. Starting the game, updating a guess, getting a hint, revealing the answer. Let's now go into chat. Let's see what this looks like. So start Geo. Misspelled it, but I think it'll still pick it up. This is very in your face. I think we're going to reduce the epileptic
Beautiful
nature
UI.
of that loader. I think this is the official ChatGPT icon. It looks like we're not loading. Also looks like we cannot exit full screen. So we're immediately going to have a few things to debug. It's fine. I do like we managed to get it full screen, and I like that we're going to be able to chat. I think we're actually in a pretty good shape. I do think it because I cannot exit, this is broken. A bit of a, I'm going to just server here. Not going to work. Restart. Let's quickly capture the issues we have seen. So I think it's very good practice. First, always work in ask mode because the agent will immediately begin coding. So even if you say, like, hey, something isn't right, it'll save you a lot of work. And it may go in and change 12 different files and actually break things. One of the most important skills of vibe coding is to be very targeted in allowing an agent to update code. Make sure it's really only updating the scope and the ask you are trying to get it to work. Loading widget, way too big screen. The loading, spinner. Make that smaller. Being very vague right now, but it should hopefully, improve. And we cannot exit screen. The exit simply work. So this will instruct the agent to go ahead and begin debugging, and then obviously we're going to have to debug why the Google Maps API doing what we expected. Looks like those are good targeted updates. Switch to agent mode. It even tells it like, hey, please let me change the code. Now I'm in agent mode. Now it won't go off and do crazy things. It will only do the things it proposed for it to do. In the meantime, I'm going to ask about the Google Map API appeared to not load. We stayed on just the spinner. Can we begin to investigate what may be going wrong? If you don't know what's wrong, it's always smart to just ask. How can we figure out what's going wrong? There's a number of things. Maybe the API key wasn't being read well. Maybe there's something wrong with the code. Maybe there's something wrong with the billing account in the Google console. There's always so many variables with these external APIs. Definitely have to verify the first point. This I disagree with. Maybe it wasn't saved properly. You verify up maybe some false information there. The AI side, it's asking to open the browser dev tool, which I don't know enough about MCP Jam to know if we have access to browser tools. It's actually a little bit of a limitation of this app. When you're in Chrome, you can open something called browser dev tool. I don't think are typically information in the terminal. Previously mentioned the terminal can also give information on when things go wrong. So maybe we could use that as a window into understanding more about the Google Maps APIs and loading. And logging on what's being read, post logging. If we're not seeing any logging, then something is it's not even reaching, the request isn't even reaching our app. Building again, and then we're going to start the server, and hopefully we're going to see some updates to the UI, at least get some more information. We added a log to make sure our API key is loading correctly, and it is. See the beginning here, which matches here. Then reconnect the server and play. This is smaller, that's
Play.
great.
There we go.
Let's make sure we can get out of this. Nope. We're going to have to debug that one again. It does seem to have a location with coordinates. We're seeing correct information. I just pasted what we see in the terminal to the agent. Let's quickly summarize. I think we did about 5 or 6 iterations of debugging. It started off with some big issues with the loading, which we quickly were able to just get smaller. We had some issues with the Google Maps API, which, after 2, 3 times where we did have to get more information, we were able to give enough context to the coding agent to figure out what the issue was. And I didn't even get into the details. I couldn't tell you. Uh, it found the issue and resolved it. We had some tweaks with the full screen. We had an issue where the locations were created didn't have Street View, but we were able to debug and make sure that we're getting to the nearest coordinates with Street View. And the beautiful thing is that, even though this took some time, I think I was probably about 20 minutes doing these debuggings. We were able to always very quickly test it with this MCP gem. So now we're very confident that if we connect it to the actual ChatGPT, that we're going to get an experience that is in line with what we have developed. Oh, let's quickly just review and look at where we're at. What have we built? Great. So we finished the build, and we can go ahead and do a bit of a final demo in MCP Jam. I'm pretty pleased with the outcome. So we can just say, hey, play Geo, and it's immediately going to load a full screen widget, kind of like what we saw with that solar system, the official example, OpenAI. And we get dropped somewhere in the world, and then we will always get dropped on a street
Looks
view.
like Asia.
Definitely Asia. There's a nice country outline here.
Yeah.
I think,
Taiwan.
pretty sure this is Taiwan. But just to show some of the functionality, we could ask, is this in Asia? And look at it, gives a bit
There's
of
the H&M as well.
give some instructions. And then let's try to ask a bit of a weird hint, right? So, like, is this a country eats Chinese food? Give away the answer without giving away the answer. So it should not say the name of the country, but it should be honest, right? Because I'm asking a targeted question. We could try to get political and ask if this is China. I'm not sure that's a test we want to do.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah,
says
nice.
Chinese cuisine is very common here, right? So, but that's very interesting. I think with harder places, you could, like, it's like that getting 20 questions kind of embedded into GeoGuessr. Is it Taiwan? Look, Uber, another
Yeah,
ChatGPT app.
they've got H&M as well.
Correct. So let's play another round. We should be able to get into a nice flow. And, I think I could totally forget I'm in ChatGPT, right? Like, it's really just a fun game. Where are we now? I mean, yeah, maybe we can definitely add some difficulty
There you
level so you don't start with Malaysia right on Street View.
go.
But I think you get the gist. So this is what we've built. I think it's nice to call out that it has kind of pretty nice here with a little tag here. What are we playing? You could toggle into full screen. It looks like that. I need, small bugs I needed to press twice, or it may just be an MCP jam, but then can toggle back into full screen. It worked. It's quite minimalist. The experience is definitely intended to play full screen, where you're here able to just talk to the agent and play. So the next step we're going to do, and if we can just kind of go back to way out of cursor, a bit of a review. What have we done? We've developed our app. We've tested it locally. Now we want to actually test it in ChatGPT. And remember, we're going to have to use that tool called ngrok to kind of create a public URL, which we're then going to use dev mode in ChatGPT to essentially load it. Um, let's go ahead and do that. And then once we're happy with that, we're going to host it and we'll be on our way to spinning our first app. Let's go back into Cursor. And we have kind of our server here running. This is our local dev server where we ran this command, pm dev. Keep this going. We're not going to stop this because this is actually right now the server. This is our app running on our machine. We want to create a public URL. So we're going to have to talk to the terminal to do this, but this terminal is busy. It's occupied. We're going to have to create a new terminal. And the way you do that in Cursor is you kind of just push from this little plus here, new terminal. We're going to create a little split screen. This one is still living here, just a new tab. We're going to start our ngrok. And all we do is capital ngrok. Type in ngrok, type in HTTP, type in 3000. The reason you type in 3000 is because the server is listening to, just like in MCP Jam, we made the server listen to HTTP 3000. So assuming that you installed ngrok, you went to the website, you made sure it's running on your computer, you're going to see this. And here you're going to see something called forwarding. That's your tunnel. So this is a URL. And this is a URL we can actually use inside ChatGPT to play around with our app. I'm going to copy this and just put it on my clipboard. And we'll leave it there. And the next step is to open ChatGPT. Let me get up here. Let this load fully. I'm on 5.2 instant. And the first thing we're going to do is enable dev mode. This allows us to add custom apps that we have built and test them. The way you do that is you go to your settings and go into, I think any of these work. It just opens a box with a bunch of options. And here we have one for apps. You're going to see all the apps you're connected to. At the bottom of that list, you probably have less than me. Maybe you don't. You're going to see something called advanced settings. And it has one option, developer mode. And again, I think as of today, you do need a pro account, enterprise, like or something to be able to dev mode. So this enables something called create app. Go ahead and click on that. And we're going to give it a name. Call it Geo. I'm going to call it Geography Guess. And the reason I'm going to do that is I don't want to infringe on their trademark. This is a different game. But we do want to submit this to the App Store. We'll leave this. This is optional. And here we can paste in the URL I have on my clipboard. But just like we did with MCP Jam, we do need to add this dash MCP. This is kind of the industry standard of where a server talks to an MCP. So you always want to go to /MCP. No authentication with this app, and just accept the terms. If all goes well, we're going to see this app get added to our apps in developer mode. It's now going to query back to ngrok. We're going to see that it can successfully connect. There it is, connected, and we can even see that it has the tools we defined. The next step is let's go ahead and the app. And I'm going to be quite efficient about something. To submit the app, we're going to have to create a walkthrough video. So I'm actually also going to just quickly record my screen. And I'm just going to quickly do a screen grab on Mac. This is very easy, just kind of an area. We're just going to record the walkthrough. That way, we already immediately have a screen recording, and it's going to speed up the submission process. So let's go ahead and tag Geography Guesser. Let's play. In the tool, ChatGPT, there's always a information whenever an external tool calls. I think it's security. You're going to see that with every single tool of every single app. Looks like it didn't start in full screen. It's not a big issue. It's very clear full screen. This is an interesting one, by the way. There we go. Full screen. In the metro, we're definitely in Asia again. Is this in Asia? Yes. A little bit more to the point than our agent in MCP Jam, which is also ChatGPT 5. So it should behave very similar. It in a tree. Sushi. We can play around when we're thinking about, yeah, ooh, give me a hint. Hello. This didn't work, and I have a hunch why. I think it's because it requires a tool call. It's a bit of a ChatGPT quirk, which we could design around. Looks like it's in Japanese writing. Is it? We can go back to green. In the future, we probably should think about a design that also thinks about the fact that every tool call requires a human approval. Where did these answer go? I do have to validate this. This does mess with the full screen experience a bit. Functionality is all working. I think, let's keep going. But yeah, it is a bit too bad that you always have to manually do this. It kind of takes you out of that gameplay flow. I don't think it's something you can get around right now.
Yeah, and this
Something
is a
to
good
keep in mind.
example. Yeah, I was going to say this is a good example of how I think these apps will improve. This is quite common at the moment with some apps. I've had the same thing happen when using Adobe's Acrobat, where it will get confused between calling a tool and keeping you natively within that app experience. And it's really annoying because sometimes you need to do something within the app experience and the tool to get it to flow through. And yeah, I think it will just be something that gets improved over time. But you can imagine where this experience will get to, where you can do the full thing, like the MCP Jam part looked. And
Yeah, so
yeah, I
I
think
could
we can carry
imagine
on for
maybe
now. But
you could do like an approve once, and then the second time you call the tool automatic. One neat way we could solve for this now is, remember in the beginning we made this design choice to go full screen instead of picture in picture, where you see the agent below, while Street View could be up here, where you could always press kind of approve tool. You still are kind of in that experience to kind of split it. But yeah, this is just kind of the trade-offs, and we can make a choice to update it. But I think for now, let's keep cracking because we're ready to submit the app. New chapter. Nothing else to say, right? Before I go on, maybe
no,
we
I
need to
think all
also
good.
make. Right, so for starting submission of the app, we're going to need to. Okay, before submitting the app, the final step will be getting it hosted. We verified it's working in ChatGPT. We're happy with it. Well, let's get it live. We're not reliant, on our computer being turned on in an ngrok tunnel for anyone to use this app. And the way that we're going to host it is we're going to use a tool called Alpic. They're specialized in MCP hosting, native analytics, and they're even designed for ChatGPT. So it's going to make it super easy. Again, there's a bunch of tools you can use. This is just but we're also going to have to upload the code we've created to GitHub. Hopefully, you've maybe had a chance to watch that GitHub video. It's not difficult, but you're going to need an account, and we're going to have to create a repository. We can do this manually. You can do this straight in Cursor, but let's just do it manually. We're going to create a new repository here. We're going to call it Geo GPT app. It can be public, it can be private, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna go ahead and make this public so that we'll share it with you if you're interested to pull it and play around with it. And just leave it all to the default. And this is going to create an empty GitHub repository that we can then upload our code to. So you're going to need that URL. We'll go back into Cursor. We'll go back into Cursor. And the agent's going to have to take a few steps here to get this into GitHub. We can simply just ask to GitHub URL. I'm actually going to quickly go into mode because I want to explain the steps it's going to take. So we have not connected to a GitHub. It's actually best practice to do this right from the beginning. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to break that and just do this. We developed it. It's going to connect to this remote origin. It's essentially the URL on GitHub. It's going to put all the changes and sort of package them, commit them, and kind of give it a version, like a version 1. You can call it like that. So that way, if we iterate, it can go to version 2, version 3, version 4. And then it's going to push that version. So pushing is uploading. It's going to feel like a lot of steps, but just want to explain what it's going to do. And then we're going to see it in our GitHub. One thing that's interesting to call out is that there's this file called git ignore, and this tells Git which files not to upload because you may have some sensitive API keys, right? So here we have this API key, and the git ignore will actually say, that don't upload it to GitHub, so you also don't publish a private API key for everyone to see. So that's just one thing that, it usually will do it automatically, but this is the reason you have that git ignore file. Let's see, it says done. Great. We have it should be an exact clone to what we have here. And then we're now ready to go ahead and Alpic to host this. We'll go ahead and go to their website. You're going to have to need an account. And all we're going to do is create a new project. You're going to have your GitHub connected. So it may ask you to connect your GitHub if you didn't sign up with your GitHub. And then you're just going to select the repository you want to host. It's really that easy. So here's the GeoGuessr ChatGPT app. And do import. Node 22 is what we built it on. And here you see something called environment variables. And this is now where we can put back in the API key. Remember, it didn't get uploaded to the GitHub because of that git ignore file. And you don't want that publicly published. But we do want the server to know about it. We're going to re-upload it. You can just copy paste this line and you can actually paste this straight in here and make sure that's marked secret. And we're going to go ahead and deploy. So this will take 1 or 2 minutes. In the meantime, while we're waiting, Elliot, let's get efficient on what are the things we need for uploading. If we go back to our checklist, we're going to need 64 by 64 SVG icon, 3 706 pixel wide screenshots, a demo walkthrough video, and tool annotations. So I took this right when we tested it. I need to go back and take a few screenshots. Elliot, do you want to maybe get a 64 by 64 SVG icon, maybe something like an earth or just a circle?
As just to how easy this can be. So I was just doing this in the background, and I definitely suggest if you're looking to create this quickly using Gemini, and their model Nano Banana Pro is the best. And what I did was I basically just, I mean, look at, you can see how really simple this is. I want to create a logo for a GeoGuessr game that I made in ChatGPT as an app. Then it gave me this first version. And when I just iterated a little bit on what I wanted, make me a minimalist design. Then I said, I want better colors. I said, imagine your Nike. I think, like I mentioned earlier in the video, it's good to position AI to make it think like how you want it to think. So it improved the colors based on that. I still don't love it, but these are the kind of things you would tweak if you were giving it. What I'd recommend is giving it a specific color palette. It works really well in response to that. And then I just asked it to make it specific to the format that I wanted as well. So I just said, make it 64 by 64. And it's kind of created it as this pixel format, which actually I prefer because it's quite good for the game. And then you can just download it straight away off that. So
Well, let's go to Alpic. We see we have it deployed, so that's ready to go. And this will actually be the URL we use to submit the app, ChatGPT. This is now live. I needed 2 more screenshots, and then we have everything we need to get this nice tool where you can exactly see the pixels. They do require 706 pixels. Just keep that in mind.
very specific. Looks great though.
Very specific. We actually should have updated the icon here. We wanted the perfect screenshots, which I think we'll probably cut a corner here. You do have the option to load that icon in things, and then you're going to be able to take a screenshot, including kind of the state. The reason I'm not making these full screen is if we go to they follow a fixed format, so you can kind of put in a prompt and a visual. Looks like maybe we could. Well, let's try one that's full screen. The problem is it has to be 706 pixels wide. If I made this like mobile, made this even a bit bigger. 706 is to here. Need to make it about to here. The way designers will do it. Screenshots. And then the way you submit an app, and we're going on to stage now, is you have to go to the platform you need this to. This is kind of the dashboard where you can get your API keys, .openai.com, whole bunch of OpenAI's features, and they've now added GPT apps near the top. This is your headquarters missions. You can see if you have apps already in submission process. We have one in review called gradient tweet. We're going to start a new one, and you just do this by hitting new app, and it'll take you through a wizard. But the good news is we have everything we need. We're going to go ahead and submit the app.
I think
Elliot,
Vince,
you
just I'm
made
being pedant. I'm being pedantic. I'm being pedantic, but I think go. Can you go back and say like we go back to the bit where there's the review ones and say like we have one submitted on this account.
yeah, because we want to pretend we have a whole bunch of apps.
Yeah. We don't want to. Yeah, exactly.
Our Ghost team account. We're kind of giving away. Yeah, this is the headquarters. Everything with your apps on ChatGPT. On this account, we have one app that is currently pending review. And this is also where we can go ahead and begin a new app submission. Go ahead and click on new app, and it'll bring us into a wizard. It'll have a couple of steps, but the good news is we have everything we need to get this app submitted pretty quickly. We'll upload the logo icon, the one that you made, Elliot. So, yeah, we can also add a dark mode. I think this will look good either way. It's not required. We're going to call geography guesser. We get a 30-character description. So countries, GPT, do something like that. We don't get too many more letters in that. And now we can do something a little bit longer. So maybe just to frame what we're doing here, and it's always nice to kind of have this in mind. This is that subtitle. It's going to be here. And then the description will be here.
And we're just going to do an example one here, but this is where you start wanting to think about metadata and discoverability. So this is critical because so far everything we've discussed today is getting the app live. But soon you really want to make sure that you get your app discovered. And part of that discoverability is ChatGPT knowing exactly when to call your app in a specific prompt workflow or show it when someone searches within the App Store. So this is general data, but we'll get into ways where you can just make sure you can refine and optimize over time the keywords here to make sure you are doing the best job you can for appearing within both people's prompts and within the App Store as well.
Well, I'm just filling out the category, which we'll put under entertainment, which, like, again, to contextualize it, it's not live yet, and it will be in the future. There will be category tabs, and one of them in the future will likely be entertainment. And it will require a website URL, developer, customer support URL, privacy policy, terms of service, demo recording URL. We are going to use our company information. You might have a company that you could use. If not, not a huge amount of work to vibe code a bit of a landing page with the terms of service, but you are going to need all that information to submit. Elliot, I would like to, in the background, send you the video I made, and maybe you could get that hosted somewhere. Our general email, grab our policy, and then here you're going to have to give some information on if you are monetizing. This is just a game. There's no monetization happening, but if your app links or directs users out of ChatGPT to make purchases, they do ask you to submit that information, and then this toggles a whole bunch of other. It's not facilitated purchase data. You just read through these, make sure that you're accurate and honest. The whole point of this review is an actual human will likely go through and test and view your app. All right, so we have the demo recording URL, the little recording we made earlier. We can go on to continue. The MCP server URL again with that -MCP. So we'll go to Alpic, we'll grab that live domain and put it here, /MCP, no auth. Click scan tools. Sometimes this bugs. So if you do see a bug here, don't worry. But it looks like it worked this time. This may not work. And I found that if you actually just refresh and try again, it does. Domain is not verified. So we're going to do some sort of domain verification. And it gives you a token and it tells you where to place this token. But one nice thing that Alpic does is it actually has just kind of an OpenAI Apps verification token. You can just paste that in, save, and that takes care of it for you. So we can go ahead and verify this and domain verified. So the next thing we're going to see is a tool justification. For each tool, explain why this annotation is accurate. And an annotation is essentially what the scope or what this tool is allowed to do. So is it a read only? Is it open world? And you don't have to understand what all this does. The easiest way to ensure that you're doing this well is to go back into our cursor, because part of the agent training includes this file that is we created called MCP tool annotation cheat sheet. And really it's just designed to help you submit this app as efficiently as possible. So I'll just go ahead and ask the agent, I'm submitting the app. I need tool annotation justifications. I'll actually just paste this in so that, can you please create these? And this should create us some usable justifications that will help us clearly explain why each tool has the annotations it does, which these were set during our development. And again, because the agent had this cheat sheet, it put in the right annotations and we'll immediately just be able to, we see them with correct answers. And now we just need to put the justifications manually. So honestly, we could choose to just speed this up real quick, right? Like now you're just watching me paste in, but I've given the cheat sheet on how to do this well and fast. Okay, great. So we have completed MCP server. Now we're going to go into testing. Here, OpenAI wants the developer to explain what is the use case, because they need to understand what is the intention, what is it supposed to do, and because an agent needs to trigger the app, find the correct tool, the way that you prompt is very important. So this is why test cases are so critical. And for this app, it's pretty straightforward. When we say, hey, we want to play, we need to make sure that the app triggers. So that's what OpenAI wants to test. So we're going to create 5 test cases, which is a bit overkill, but it's a hard requirement to put 5. And you can see that, they give some examples, right? Like the use case, research flights, the exact prompt that we should conduct to begin the test. So we being an OpenAI quality assurance app submission reviewer, which tools should be called, and the expected output we should expect to receive back from the MCP server. So here, the way that we can approach this in a quite quick manner is just to go back to our cursor. This is why it's so great to have an agent that knows exactly what your app does and is trained on all the right data. Because what we can also do now is just instruct it, please come up with concrete, strong test cases that show off the intended functionality of the app. And we will need to ask for 5 of them, 5 test cases, and then we'll just type in the requirements. So these look right. So let's play GeoGuessr. The tool trigger should be GeoGuessr, making a correct guess, an incorrect guess, requesting progressive hints, give up reveal answer, freeform question. Yeah, this all looks good. So yeah, now we're back to, unfortunately, some manual copy and pasting. Okay, done. Let's go ahead, hit continue. Now we're going to upload the screenshots we created earlier. And again, we have the right width, and it says 4 max. I think they do recommend up to 3. So we'll go ahead and upload an image. Let's just go to recent. We had a couple we made. This was a good one. You're joking. I thought I had them exactly at 706. They're so strict. I'll have to open them in Figma.
We can just do a little bit of editing, but yeah, they are very strict with it, and actually, in a way, it's good because I think it will just lead to the App Store will look really good, and I think they're probably going to direct people to naturally the best app for anyone that's familiar with the mobile App Store. The best apps have the best images, and this is a really important part just to call out because it's going to be the first thing that people see when they go to your app in the App Store. And so a couple of things I'd say that's worth calling out. You want to make sure that the image is really clear and it really highlights the use case and does that visually. So think about the best features and tools within your application and how you can highlight those. Also, you want to do a combination of text and image. So we might not have the best necessarily examples here, but I think you can see some really good ones from the ChatGPT App Store because someone should be able to visually just look at the images that are used and understand what the app can do, and then also read the metadata. And so you want to backwards engineer, okay, what are going to be my most interesting features? And then how can I make sure that those are, visualized and shown very well in some way? I like how they've laid this out, honestly. Nice image and the kind of prompt you can give. You can see how they're orientating the whole thing around someone creating a prompt and then generating your application.
Let's see if we can try this widescreen, full screen one. Let's see how that looks. Let's give it a live test.
We can just see
Oh, need to add one more. So
a little bit of a doomy location.
yeah, we should have probably picked something that's a little bit
Yeah,
more.
would
We
would
could we
would
could
not
quickly grab a new
advise
one.
you picking. No, 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 it's fine.
Actually, I already turned off. Yeah, well let's just keep it, right? Should we go for it? Drop me some more. This is the trigger, right? So we kind of want it to be like a guess. Is this in Japan? Cool. Should we just do these two, or should we
Yeah,
add one more? You
I
said
think it
we'll
looks
add one
good.
more? Yeah, cool. So finally, you can add a translation for this one. Don't think that's necessary. Keep it as English, which is mandatory. You can allow or block countries. I think they might even require you. Please fix them. Yeah, I think you have to do this. So I think if you put allow and just leave it as is, I'm pretty confident this defaults to every single country. And then you can add a release note. So we can just say version 1.0, initial game release with full screen toggle and 50. I think we have around 50 locations, I guess. And then as we add more versions in the future, it's best practice to kind of say in this version, what did we update? So you can follow along, agree to their policy, compliance. My app does not serve or display advertisements. We're submitting this as a business. This is a business verified ChatGPT account. My app is not designed for so a bunch of privacy and policy compliance. And that's it. You can go ahead and click submit for review. And if we go back, we're going to see now that we have Geography Guesser officially submit as under status review. So that is it. We have from the very beginning gone through, and we can maybe close here from just the idea all the way to submission. This is everything you need to know to design, get inspired, build, and submit apps on ChatGPT.
As Vincent said, we've covered everything there. Just to recap as well, everything that we've been through. So we've been through the definitions of ChatGPT apps, exactly what they are, why they're interesting, and why the opportunity is big. We then went through and explained how they worked, so the actual mechanics, so you understood those. We've been through what are the interesting use cases, how to think about them, and how you can actually make a really good ChatGPT app. We've gone through monetization, and that's looking at different ways to think about how ChatGPT apps are strategic for your business, but then also how to begin to monetize them both in the platform and outside it. We built a whole app end to end, and this is really just an example of how you can build if you wanted to get one built yourself, and just showing you the different components of that, hosting it, and then going through the full submission process as well. Now, we also are going to do a full deep dive into distribution. We mentioned a number of distribution tactics throughout the whole video. The main thing to think about here is at the moment, you need to get discovered in the App Store, and you need to find ways to get optimized for being found within LLMs themselves. And that is everything, a complete guide to everything you need to know and understand within ChatGPT apps. And basically, and then, and that is it, a full end-to-end guide as to really everything that you need to understand in the space today, particularly if you're looking to get your first app live. And expect a lot more from us in those specific sections. And if you want to discover, design, and build better ChatGPT apps, definitely check out on ChatGPT. And as you get your apps live, feel free to submit them, and they can be live on that discoverability platform as well. Also to call out, we've got the Discord community that is very active. So we want to make sure that, if you have any questions about building, if you want to get anything checked, definitely go in there. We're very active in there as well, and people in the community can answer any questions. Vince, anything else you wanted to mention?
Let us know what cool apps you're thinking about and what you're building. We'd love to connect and love to get inspired from each other.
100%. All the connects are just in the comments, and hopefully we'll see you in the Discord.